Hello and welcome. On the pod tonight, we have returning guest Nev and drummer of the band Snark, Matias Catavedera. How we going, guys?
We're going great.
Yeah, good,
Very
mate.
good.
Good to have you, Buddy. Good to have you back, Nev.
Good to be back.
Good. All right. I think there's only one place to start, and it's got to be at the Bernabeu with Barcelona just hammering Madrid 4-0 in the early hours of the morning for us last night for you, Nev. Nev, I want to start with you. Where did it all go wrong for Real Madrid in this game?
I don't think, the commentators were saying, Benzema's missing, Real Madrid don't know how to play without Benzema. And I don't think it's as simple as that, because Real were basically playing with Kroos and Modric and Valverde, interchanging between that, sort of like a false nine. But sometimes they were even playing with two nines, like Kroos and Modric were both trying to pressure the back four. And I don't think that the issue was necessarily just that Benzema was missing, but they did definitely look out of sorts. And there was just so many gaps left in the midfield because they were doing that. And that just allowed Barca to just play all over them. They just looked... They just looked not interested as well. They had no idea how to play, how to press, how to keep the ball really, and Barca just looked a completely different outfit compared to what they were under Koeman. Xavi's doing an excellent job, and yeah, they were just exploiting that space that Real was just leaving for them, and yeah, it was definitely in my opinion, a demolition and a clinic put on by Barca.
So I want to, and you make good points. You pretty much saw the game how I saw it from a Real Madrid perspective, and it got me thinking. Because Carlo Ancelotti, after the game, he came out and he apologized, and he said it was his fault. He took full responsibility, and I don't think he could do anything else because the tactics were wacky, to say the least. I mean, I had to scratch my head. I had to scratch my brain and search to see why he possibly could have gone with like you said, the two midfielders, and it was Kroos and Modric a lot of the time, and he wanted to press them right up against the centre and leave that 3v2 in midfield. And the only explanation I could come with was he trusted Casemiro to sit enough in front and screen, and he wanted the legs of Valverde in there to... He thought those two could combat the three of Barcelona, and physically, I guess they could, but because it was just those two, and Casemiro always has to play the role of screener, and he always has to drop into those gaps at the back, especially with Militao and Alaba, who are naturally the kind of centre-backs who want to go in and press. It was too much work. He asked way too much work of Casemiro in there, and then he also asked too much from Modric to go up and press, but then when they had possession, in the brief moments they had possession in the game, he wanted Modric to come back and help play out, and they were very wacky tactics. That's the only thing I could search for, and I think he was right in coming out and saying that was fully his responsibility. Obviously, Real could have done a more professional job of keeping the embarrassment down, because 4-0 flattered them. It could have been 6, it could have been 7.
Yeah.
From a Barcelona point of view, Ronald Araujo was oddly probably the most important player, because I thought when the game was still even early on, Real Madrid were trying to leave him free at the right back role and then go on and press with him. And I don't think that was the right tactic in itself, because Real don't have the legs to go and back up Vinny when he goes and presses that ball. But every time, if there's a player you want to leave to have the ball, I would say it would be Araujo at that right back position. But every time he got the ball, he found a pass, he drove it forward, he found Dembele's feet so he could go one-on-one with Nacho. And if you ask me, what's the one matchup you don't want in that game if you're Real Madrid? I don't want Dembele up against Nacho 1v1. He got killed on numerous occasions, and obviously the Aubameyang goal comes from that side. Alaba has got to go with his head at that ball. He can't go with his feet. And I think he knew the mistake he made, and Militao looked at him. But I just think obviously they got it wrong, but Araujo was really important in the early stages when the game was still open. But then that midfield, I think that midfield, and I want to touch on Vinny versus Pedri because two great young players. How good a player is Pedri? Finding those holes, that little dink in the first half to nearly set up a goal, fantastic. But I think you touched on it, Nev. That midfield supremacy Barca were able to gain meant that Real couldn't come out and press on the fullbacks because the wide players had to split players. They were too worried about what Pedri and De Jong were doing in those pockets. So I think you've hit it on the head. Ancelotti just got it all wrong in this game.
Yeah, and over the years, the blueprint when playing Barcelona has been to pretty much take Busquets out of the game, and it was almost as if Busquets was playing alone in that midfield. Like, he had so much time and space where he could receive the ball and distribute it, and that opened them up completely. But like, it wasn't just him that was open. Like, it was Pedri and De Jong that was open as well. Like, at all times, they had a couple of seconds to receive the ball, look up. They were under no pressure ever. So it was, Ancelotti definitely got that wrong, especially with the midfield. That really killed them.
Yeah. Marty, we talk about this Barcelona and we give them their praise for this game this morning. And one thing, obviously, we knew it from the start of the season, but now they actually have a direction. But I was excited at the start of the season, and definitely now that they have a direction with Xavi, to see this Messi-less Barcelona. How do you feel about Barcelona going forward without Messi? Are you excited to see what they can do?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So I think it's fair to say that Messi hasn't really looked himself for a few years. But even though when he was still at Barcelona, he was still like a really key player for them because it's Messi, right? Like, so they always build the team around him, and he was still that key player for them. And I was always very excited to see what would happen when he left and see what Barcelona would do and how they would evolve their game, because obviously now Messi was Barcelona for a long time, So him being gone was very exciting. And you got to say it's good to see like young players like Pedri coming along and like looking so good and making an impact for Barcelona. No one's going to fill the shoes of Messi, I suppose, but I think the best thing that could happen to Barca was Messi leaving, because maybe in the short term, like they did struggle in that first half of the season, but now they're able to like move on from him and like bring in young players and change the team a little bit and adapt to playing without him. And they're actually looking pretty good, right? Like Xavi's doing a really good job.
An excellent job, fantastic job, and you hit it there as well with you would use the word change, and they can change the way they play, and we sort of briefly touched on it in the last pod. That Xavi looks like he's willing to be flexible. It doesn't have to be all the Guardiola original blueprint, and obviously not having Messi in the team really helps with that. Yeah.
It really does. It's and like as well, like you watching Messi now at PSG is it's just not the same player that he was when he was absolutely destroying it, So he's kind of like I think he's a bit of a burden almost, because if you have Messi in your team, you have to play him because he's Messi. But at the same time, do you really want to play him? Because his impact on the game isn't anywhere near as good as it used to be. But defensively, he's still a huge burden for a team. So I think, again, the best thing that could happen for Barcelona was losing or letting Messi go, I suppose, and just moving on,
I have been thinking about that a lot, obviously, in recent years, as Ronaldo and Messi's their play dwindles, but obviously they still carry the name, so they do come with that burden. I think we talked about it a little bit last time, touching on Man United and how if Cristiano Ronaldo comes to your team, he comes as Cristiano Ronaldo. He's almost larger than football at this point. So, and we also spoke about it a little bit, but we'll go a bit further in depth. Nev, I want to ask you, next 10 years, who is going to be the better player? Who's going to accomplish more? Who's going to go down in the history books as the better player? Do you think it'll be Pedri or Vinicius Jr.?
Well, they both play different roles in the team. I think.
Yeah.
Vinicius, obviously, he does rely a lot on his speed and other physical attributes, whereas Pedri, he reminds me a lot of like an Iniesta or a Xavi, and like obviously a lot of people will make that comparison as well. And I think being that type of player where you're more reliant on your skill, like your technical ability on the ball, you obviously have a much higher ceiling and you can become more versatile. Whereas Vinicius will be seen as more one-dimensional unless he can develop his game. He obviously has the skill to back it up as well, but Pedri, I think he has a higher ceiling, and I think if he keeps on this path and obviously avoids injuries, because that's one of the most important aspects of someone's career, I think he will definitely develop into a better player.
Ooh, definitely. Putting your neck on the line with that one.
Well, like let's look at his CV already. Like he's already weren't they saying last year?
Sorry, go on.
He played like 70 games or something last year. Like he was a starter for Spain at 19 years old. He played like every game of the Euros. He then went onto the Olympics as well. Like he's already established himself. Like he's a starter for Barca at 19, 20 years old, a starter for Spain, and yeah, like he's already there. Like in terms of that, so he doesn't need to essentially battle anyone. Like he just needs to keep on form to keep his spot. That's all. Like he doesn't need to break into any teams.
And the thing for me as well with him, he looks really good, doesn't he? He looks like a proper player, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we said it last time. He looks like the Iniesta successor. He really can do everything. And he looks so mature in there. The way he can slow things down by himself, and he's so young that he can have that influence on his team already. It's really something to watch over the next couple of years. But similarly, I think the explosion that Vinicius had, and it's hard to judge him off this game, and we might be down around Madrid, we might be down on him a little bit after this game, but without Benzema, my goodness, if you needed proof of a player's influence on a really top team, there it is right there. I mean, I know the commentator, and you take umbrage with the commentator saying that it was all Benzema, why that happened, Nev, but I mean, they looked lost without him. No reference point, no player in there to know when to press and engage, and then no link up, and no leader when they looked in front of them, because he's the guy who wears the armband, and he is the leader of this team. So I think they will crush it, and it actually reminds me of the Liverpool team after Suarez left. Suarez made so many of those players like Sterling and Coutinho look above and beyond what they were at that time. And then when they lost him, they lost everything the next season. So that's kind of the vibe I got from Benzema being missing from this team today. But obviously they shouldn't have capitulated like that. So, Mati, I got a question for you now. We've just gone on about Barcelona's future.
Yeah,
we're exciting players. So in Spain, next 4 years, we'll go next 4 years. Which club would you rather be? Would you rather be Real Madrid, Barcelona, or Atletico Madrid?
next 4 years.
Next 4 years.
That's an interesting question.
You want to hear the cases for each?
Yeah, I mean, if you got cases, yeah.
Okay, so in Real Madrid's case, I think they have for the next 4 years, the highest ceiling out of all, and that is dependent on their ability to spend. Because if
They've got a
they
new
get
stadium as well, right?
Exactly, they get in a new stadium. But if all reports are true, what's suggested, and they get Mbappe in the summer, and then Benzema has no problems with Mbappe coming in, and they click together, having those two up front, I think takes your ceiling far and beyond.
I think Benzema as well would work very well with Mbappe, just because it feels like Benzema is not a selfish player. You know, he's the player of the team. He does everything for the team in that position and lets the key players out wide come in and be more impactful, I would say. So I could, yeah.
He has done that role, but the only thing I'm concerned with is will he be willing to relinquish it at this stage? Because now he is the man, and now we've seen Real Madrid can win a league title and they could get to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, which we'll talk about later. But is because these guys are ultra competitive at the end of the day, and I know they're French teammates, and I know Benzema is used to doing that role, but will he relinquish it at this stage? So the next team, Barcelona, we just heard about them. The future looks very bright with Xavi, very good young players. Question mark over their ability to spend. And if that's the case, they've kind of locked themselves into Aubameyang up front for probably most of those 4 years because they spent a lot on his wages. And if they can't really spend and they spent on him, are they going to spend on another striker, really? Are they going to? They won't be able to break the bank, you wouldn't think, if they have an inability to spend. So that's their cause. And Atletico, I mean, what can you say? Simeone, I don't think he's going to leave them. I don't know if I see that in the next 4 years. We've been saying that for so long. I can't see it. They got the new stadium in the Wanda Metropolitano. They'll have a steady team. They have a few young players in there. I mean, João Felix.
He's very good.
Lamar's not that old. I mean, I think they need to address the centre backs, but I don't think they're particularly old. They're not young either because, Simeone wants to work with professionals. So that's a team that feels like the safest bet out of the three.
Yeah. Do you reckon? I don't know. I think the problem with Atletico is that Simeone is... I feel like he's given almost all that he can give. He's showed all his cards already, and he has improved and changed the team throughout like his whole tenure that he's been there. And like the tactics and the way that Atletico play has changed slightly here and there, but I just don't see Atletico Madrid really like ever overtaking Barcelona and Real. Like they may every once in a while win a La Liga, but I just don't think that they're going to be above Barcelona.
And that's the argument for them is that they'll be steady enough that if the other two slip or are not where their potential should be, then they could come in and win a league title. And they're perennially deep in the Champions League as well. So you're ruling them out. Who you take out of Real Madrid or Barcelona?
It's so tough. I'd say it might seem kind of lame to sit on the fence here, but I'll say 50-50 because you could see it go either way, right? Like Real Madrid will always have money and will always buy good players, and Barcelona, they just have a philosophy that if they stick to it and they get the right people in charge, like Xavi and stuff and things like that, they will probably be good for a while, and just continue to bring out so many good, talented players because they have them and they keep bringing them. So in 4 years, I'd say it's 50-50.
If I can just add
Nev,
to that,
do you want to get off that fence?
Yeah, well, I think if you're talking about like the next 4, like let's just add another year, next 5 years, like Modric is most likely going to retire after this season because he's already 36. I think he's turning 37. You got Cruz as well, who's 32. Benzema's already 32, 33. Alaba's 29. I think he's only 30 this year. They have an aging squad. So whereas Barca have a couple of older players, but it looks like Xavi's already started that revitalization of young players. So in terms of that, I think Real's going to slip up when they're trying to rejuvenate and refresh their squad, and Barca's probably going to take it, and Atletico will probably take one in there as well because it's Simeone. Like he always manages to get like a league title somewhere in there when Barca and Real do slip up, and I think that because Barca's squad is, it's starting to refresh and starting to bring in some younger talent, they might not have that experience over like the course of a 38 game season to keep up that title challenge.
Yeah,
I have to say,
it's a good. Oh, sorry, go on, Mati.
No, I think the point you made, Nevin, is really good. Actually, the one that Real Madrid have a lot of really important players that are getting really old, or old enough that they need to retire soon. So having to change that many key players could be a lot harder than, for example, Barcelona having to replace Messi. Because as one player, one position, Real Madrid have quite a few in different positions that they might have to start looking at replacing maybe. So that could be a much tougher job overall. So it could set them back a little bit.
Yeah, to be fair, I think Real Madrid really only have to replace 2 players. Obviously, they've been mainstays in what they've done over the past 8 years to a decade in Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. But like you say, 30 is not that old for David Alaba at the back. Casemiro's 30 as well, and I think he's got years left in him. Militao's not old. Vinicius is coming through, and I don't see Benzema falling off a cliff when he's in this form at 32, going on 33. So towards the end of that 4 years, yes, maybe then Benzema's fallen off, and if you haven't gotten Mbappe in, then you're looking at maybe a bleaker period there. And Alaba's gone on, and Casemiro's gone on a bit, but probably first 2 to 3 years of that 4, I think Real are still got key players in those positions. I mean, losing Luka Modric will be a loss. Toni Kroos somewhat. I mean, at this age, he struggles to get around the pitch now. But Camavinga's coming through. He looks all right. We'll be interested to see how he develops. So I just thought that would be a fun question to throw out there.
Yeah.
All right. I think we'll move on. Move across the water to the Isle nation that is Britain. Race for the top 4. And we had a really key game this morning, last night for you, Neville, yesterday afternoon.
2 key games.
Spurs,
really.
West Ham. Nev, I wanted to get your thoughts on what you saw, how you thought the game played out, especially taking into account what we said in the preview to this game last pod.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very easy to say that West Ham looked tired and lethargic. That's probably the simplest way to put it. And I felt that, especially in the first half, it took them a while to get into the game. And Tottenham just for the first 30, 40 minutes, they just seemed like with every possession that they were threatening and they were going to score. So I'm still questioning whether that's more West Ham's doing because they came from playing 120 minutes on Thursday, or that's Tottenham starting to click perhaps under Conte, because he did bring in those who did he bring in, Bentancur and
Kulusevski.
Yeah, so he brought in 2 players that he's familiar with from the Italian league, and are they starting to click, or was West Ham just caught in a really vulnerable state? In the second half, with it being 2-1, it just seemed like Conte was happy to sit back in 2 banks of 4 and try and hit them on the counter. And I think that's a bit of a gamble, but it did obviously pay off. It's Son getting that 3rd goal in the 85th minute or something like that. But overall, West Ham didn't really look threatening, and I think it was a comfortable win for Tottenham overall.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it does go back to it, and I think it was comfortable because West Ham did look tired to me. It did. I mean, it's a cliche and it's easy to say, but we touched on it last pod. I thought they did look tired, right, and justifiably so. They looked tired, but even the real lack of a push in the second, I think they could only go in little spurts, and it just wasn't enough. They couldn't get through what Spurs were doing, and Spurs were doing what they do, which is Conte saying there's no counter press. If we lose the ball, you get straight back into shape. You get into the middle third and you get back into shape. And then we'll go from there from a position of strength. I feel strongly one way or the other. It's about what players you have and what you believe in. And if you can do it well, then do it well. And they can do it well because Harry Kane's a fantastic striker, a fantastic 9.5 who drops into those spaces. The range of passing is really really special for a striker. And then when you have Son and now Kulusevski who can help, and he's hit the ground and he looks like he's fitting into this system well. Bentancur's been a bit more hit and miss, but I think he's just starting to find his feet in the Premier League. I think they're two pretty good bits of business, to be fair. I always thought Bentancur was a serviceable player and he'll do well in a 3-4-3 if Conte wants to play it. And then I think Kulusevski, I never saw much of him to impress me at Juve, but he has impressed me at Tottenham so far. So Spurs, I think, from this moment forward, Matti, who do you have going in that number 4 spot now that Spurs have got that win against West Ham?
For me, it has to be Arsenal. Like, just you got to look at the way they're playing compared to the other teams that are in the they're trying to get into the top 4. United, they're just United at the moment. No one knows what's going on with United right now. Like, they win games, kind of, and then they really struggle some games, and they're all over the place a little bit. Arsenal, for me, are playing the best football. They look the best. They look the strongest. They look like they, the season has gone on and they've got better and better and better. And now they're really coming to fruition, and they just need to be consistent. The only problem with Arsenal, I would say, in their run-up to top 4 is they have the toughest run-up out of themselves, Tottenham and Man United. And Tottenham, the only thing about them is that they can lose games sometimes unexpectedly, But I imagine that the longer Conte has, gets to work with his team, he's going to do better with them, and they're going to start to win more games and be more consistent. But in my eyes, it's still Arsenal that should get the top 4. It's for them to lose, I think.
And I wanted to touch on this, Matti. Did you hear the comments, Mikel Arteta's comments before the match against Villa on the weekend?
No, I did not. What did he say?
Well, after the pod, go and check them out. Nev, did you hear them?
Yeah. He was complaining about the fixture congestion.
Really having to go.
Yeah, and look, I heard his justification on that. Like, when you're playing in Europe, there's nothing you can do. Like, you know that you're going to have a game on, depending on whether you're in Champions League or Europa League, you're going to have a game on either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And then you're going to have a game on either Saturday or Sunday. His main gripe was with the fact that it's the Premier League setting its own fixtures, and that they scheduled the Villa game at 12:30, which gave very, very little time for recovery for Arsenal. Villa had the whole week off, and Arsenal played on Wednesday night, and then they had, Saturday early afternoon to play again. They could have set that fixture for Saturday evening or even Sunday, because it wouldn't have conflicted with either Aston Villa or Arsenal. Yes, it would have conflicted with TV scheduling, but this then comes into question, player welfare, and they're going to bring that up, and everyone complains about it in that late December, New Year, Christmas, New Year's period. Everyone complains about that. You're playing every 2 or 3 days, and you have 3 or 4 games in the space of 10 or 12 days. You're pretty much getting a very similar thing here. And like I said, I think it was mostly TV scheduling, but if it wasn't for that, why couldn't they have played on Saturday afternoon or on Sunday afternoon or evening or something like that? So that's what he was complaining about. He wasn't complaining about the fact that they have to play 2 games in 3 days. He was just complaining about the scheduling, more time-wise than day-wise.
Okay, but let's not lose sight of the fact that TV scheduling is the reason that this is a multi-pound business. So TV scheduling at the end of the day is almost everything in terms of what makes this game how it is right now. So I think he should give up his fee or whatever, his weekly wage, if he wants. If it means Arsenal can't get the money from that TV, let's see how that goes down first of all. And then second of all, if he wants to make the Champions League, his team are going to have to do this next season. We talked about it at last pod how they had 6 games going into that Liverpool game since the start of Feb. I mean, every other club could have complained at that time, but they were playing so few games. They have no European football. You can't complain in that situation, and especially the way he did, so sarcastic. I think he just turned people against you. I think he's done a fantastic job this season, but I sense that a lot of people don't really like Arteta. I didn't think Gerrard, the way he looked on the touchline, his body language, I think he really hated losing to Arteta, watching him go up and down the touchline. There was a few pre-match comments from one of the pundits who does the normal thing, and he was just talking about how the fans love it. He looks great on the touchlines doing that. I don't think the players really buy into it. So I just think he's doing a great job. So you can't turn on him yet, but maybe when that chance comes to turn on Arteta, I think a few will want to turn on Arteta, and him doing this doesn't help.
If I
You think Arsenal fans will turn on him?
Look,
No, not necessarily Arsenal fans. Obviously, if the results go wrong, then Arsenal fans will. They're notorious for that, obviously. But I think the media, if things just start slipping just a tiny little bit, then I think the media will, if they get a chance, they'll do that, because they do that to everyone. But you just don't need to give people ammunition to do that.
Yeah, look, if I can just add to that, like, I can completely agree with you that the fact that these players and managers, they're getting paid, 6 figures weekly. They're getting people's annual salaries in a week. So, and they're professionals. They have the ultimate recovery, facilities to go from one game to the next. So they should be able to take 2 or 3 days to recover. In terms of what he's doing, I think that he's trying to, especially for these last 9 or 10 games, he's trying to probably create like a siege mentality, like an us versus them mentality within the team, so the team can become more united and be like, the whole world is against us, the whole Premier League is against us. We're going to overcome this where if we stay together as a team in unison. And that might have been like the first seeds of that coming through, because you've seen other managers do the same thing like in the past, and
Klopp does it all the time.
Klopp and Pep does it all. They always complain about the fixture list, whereas like someone like Moyes, he never complains. Like he's for the scheduling. But yeah, I just think that was probably Arteta's aim, like trying to protect his players and trying to get them more united.
Yeah, I feel more convinced when it's Klopp or Guardiola, I must say. But that is a good point. I think maybe he's laying those seeds in. I don't really understand why, but if it works, it works come the end of the season if they finish top 4.
Yeah, well, hey, they have
it sounds like you made a good point, though.
They have 10 games left. Like they need to lock down now. So otherwise, they're going to be playing Europa League next year instead of Champions League, and they're not going to be able to get the players they want.
They've been quite locked down, though. That's why I don't see the need. But anyway, at the end of the day, he didn't really need to do it, because that was about almost as comfortable a 1-0 as you'll see. Villa didn't really come out. I think it was interesting to watch. I haven't watched too much of Villa under Gerrard, but I've seen bits and pieces. He plays that almost that Christmas tree, that 4-3-2-1. He almost wants to play like Liverpool, in the sense that those wider midfielders who are meant to support, or in his case, the 210s who are meant to support the striker, he doesn't want them tracking back and making 4s and 5s in the midfield. He wants them staying forward. But the difference is Liverpool have Mo Salah and Sadio Mane, who are leading sort of a pinch press, and they're sort of pressing the ball to angles where they want it to go. Coutinho and Buendia didn't do that. Any aggression or hunger in that press, and what happens is you leave so much space down the outside that teams can just advance the ball no problems, or if they want to keep possession, Arsenal were doing it all the time with Odegaard popping up in those positions wide of it and just controlling possession. So it was a really comfortable win at the end of the day, and it took me back to after the game. It got me thinking about what you said last pod, Nev, about Arsenal being on the same path as Liverpool, and the thing I think which will be crucial is this coming summer, whether they get top 4 or not. This coming summer will be interesting to see if they are on the same path, well, and the way they start next season, or if this was sort of the one season wonder and they're back to challenging for top 4 or not even making it again next season. I think at the start of this, so if we look at them side by side, Klopp and Arteta sort of came in similar positions in the season in their first season. Maybe Arteta a bit later, and they had that sort of half to 3/4 of a season their first season. Nothing's expected when you come in at that time. Obviously, the clubs were both struggling. That's why they got new managers in, and then Klopp in his second season or his first full season takes Liverpool into the top 4 in the same situation that Arsenal have right now in terms of no European football, in terms of no real star players on the team. They had some good players, obviously, but no standout stars, really, and just a good cohesive unit working together, finishing that 4th place, so which obviously would happen to Arsenal if they were to lock it down. And then so now Arteta's already a season behind Klopp in terms of that same path, but that is what it is. So now I sort of adjusted my expectations for Arteta after last season to go back to they need to at least challenge for top 4, which means last 3 games, they're still in the hunt for top 4 and well in it. And I think there should be no doubt that that's going to happen at least. So now it's a question of whether he can exceed expectations and get into that top 4. Then, obviously, if they get in that top 4, summer is crucial because the signings they make, can they bring in those match changes? Because obviously Liverpool brought in Mo Salah that summer. And then the year after, they really announced themselves in that 17-18 season. They went on and said, hey, we're here and we're going to be a problem in the coming years. You remember City on their unbeaten run, looking like they were going to be invincibles to go to Anfield and that dramatic 4-3 win for Liverpool. And that was really when Liverpool announced next season, and making the Champions League final, obviously, they said next season will be your main challenge. And we're going to finish 4th this season because we're challenging for Champions League. But next season, we will be at least number 2 if we're not number 1. And they went on and did that. And obviously, you compare and contrast, Arsenal are already a season behind. And this season, if they do finish top 4, it will be very similar to the Liverpool season where they finished top 4. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember Liverpool really claiming a big scalp in that top 4 season. But they finished in the top 4. And that would be like what Arsenal will do this season. And then it's just how they kick on, because next season, if you are top 4, to be following that path like Liverpool, you need to do something pretty extraordinary. They made a Champions League final and then they had that announcement game against City. So Arsenal have been terrible against the big 3, obviously. And a good performance against Chelsea, maybe a win, and you could start to believe and roll on. So that's my thoughts on what the summer means to Arsenal. What do you think on that, Marty?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about progress, I suppose, right? Like when you're talking about like Klopp and Liverpool have always made signings that I think a lot of their fans and a lot of people looked at the time and they're like, that's a weird signing. Like, that's not really the kind of signing that gets you propels you forward. And yet these signings have, blown people out of the water. They've like exceeded expectations, pretty much all of them, and progressed the team. And the team became much better, more solid, more threatening, more like what Klopp wanted. So it's the summer is huge for Arsenal, I think, especially if they make Champions League. And maybe even more so if they don't, because then they still have to progress, right? Arteta still has to progress that team, because if they make top 4, they need to progress. If they don't, they need to make sure that next season they are going to make top 4, because if they don't again, that's probably Arteta losing his job there, right? Surely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think it's everything this summer this summer coming for Arsenal, and the signings they make are really important, I think. But yeah, it's everything, because they need to be the right kind of signings too. They can't be the kind of signings that we're used to seeing from Arsenal, where they sign these players and you're like, yeah, that's a great signing. And then it turns out that, there's attitude problems or they're not quite right. The manager doesn't quite like them. There's problems. And it needs to be the kind of signings that they've had recently that the players that have come in have made an impact and they're fitting really well into what Arteta's trying to do at Arsenal. So it's pretty. If I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be pretty excited, honestly. It's good to see.
So you don't want another Mesut Ozil?
Me personally, at Arsenal,
Of course
I would love to see that happen. Yeah, but
I think
but
we have
realistically, I think
player.
it's not what they want.
I think we have a similar player with Odegaard, but he works much, much harder off the ball than Ozil.
Yeah, he looks good.
Yeah.
He hasn't looked as good as Ozil, to be fair, but he gives you more.
Well,
Well,
Ozil came to Arsenal when he was 27 or something. Like, he already had a couple of 3 or 4 seasons at Real. So
at Real, yeah.
Odegaard's only 21, 22. So he's come through
Really?
at
He's
a much
very young.
younger age. Yeah. So let's see how
he's a very good signing.
He's been an excellent signing. I think this summer, this last summer that went by, Ramsdale's been excellent. Odegaard's been excellent. Tomiyasu was, in my eyes, he was excellent until he got injured. Lokonga's shown signs that he can be very good, and Nuno Tavares has shown signs at the beginning of the season in the smaller games. He's shown that he's a very good and exciting player, but I think he might end up getting converted to once Arsenal establish themselves a little bit more and Arteta can start experimenting with different formations, then he can start playing in a back 5 or something like that, because he doesn't fit in a back 4 because he's way too attacking. So yeah, I think they.
Well, we know Arteta. He's not averse to going to the back 3. He started a lot of his Arsenal managerial career with that. So, Nev, now we're talking about Arsenal. We're talking about how important the summer is.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to throw out 3 duos, all from Serie A, who may address the central midfield problem and the striker problem. So the first one I want to mention is watch Lazio Roma on the weekend. Roma killed them 3-0. Lazio didn't look very good, but they have 2 very good players at Lazio. They have Sergej Milinkovic-Savic and Ciro Immobile. I can offer that to Arsenal for 100 mil. The second one would be Napoli flying high second in Serie A, but we know the Premier League has more money and is the stronger league at the moment. So there could be a chance that you could lure away Fabian Ruiz from the centre of that midfield and Victor Osimhen up front. And then finally we go to the defending champions, Inter. You can have, and for those 2, that's 125 mil. And then if we go to Inter, you could have Brozovic and Lautaro Martinez for 130 mil. If you had those 3 options, who would you plug in to that Arsenal team?
I've seen Martinez and Brozovic the most out of all of those, so I'll take the last option. Every time I've seen Brozovic, I've rarely ever seen him give the ball away, and I think he's only 29 or 30, so he still has a couple of years left in him, and he plays that holding role, so he'd be good, but I don't think that's Arsenal's game plan at the moment in terms of signing slightly older players. But Martinez would definitely be an excellent signing to take, and he could interchange with Martinelli playing through the centre or through the left wing.
Yeah, I see that versatility. I think Brozovic has been fantastic. Obviously, he plays in the 5-3-2, but he gets a lot of freedom in that sitting role. So I think putting him next to Partey would work quite nicely. Him as more of the, not quite box to box, but he's more the distributor from there, and he can get in and he can link up play and join the attacks, not necessarily getting into the box, but helping out with that. Marty, have you seen much of those duos?
Can I just add?
Sorry, Nev, were you going to speak?
Can I just want to add though, in the last couple of games, Partey's been playing mostly by himself, sitting, and Jacques has actually been playing more as almost like a false 9 to an extent, or like a 10 on the left hand side. So he hasn't been playing as defensive, and I think that's actually minimized some of the risk when we've been hit on the counter, because Xhaka isn't sitting, like he's playing in a more advanced position. So it seems like we need someone who's going to play in that gap, so that you have Ødegaard playing in that number 10 on the right hand side, and then you need another player playing in the number 10 on the other side, and Partey's pretty much sitting by himself.
Well, you want a full 10 on the other side, not an 8. You want a 10 there, and Partey covers all that ground himself.
Something like a Xhaka, but more versatile and quicker. Like a Xhaka seems he has an excellent range of passing, but he's a little bit too slow. So someone a little bit more quicker than him, but similar.
Mati, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'd definitely take the Napoli duo for me. Fabian Ruiz is a very good player. Maybe too light for the Premier League. Probably not though, because he's technically good enough, I would say. But for me, Victor Osimhen is incredible. He's so fast. He's strong. Shoots quite really strong shots, and I don't know. He would be very, very hard to defend against. I think more so than any of the two other strikers. I just think he would be so good for Arsenal. And pretty much for any team in the Premier League. Yeah,
built for the Premier League was what I was going to say. Yeah. He looks wiry. He scored a brace, I think, on the weekend for Napoli. But yeah, he does look like a good player. And I've got to say, the Lazio duo, I think you could get him at the cheapest. Obviously, Ciro Immobile's age means you're bringing in someone proven rather than young, but he's been banging them in season after season now.
Yeah,
because you can get older players for cheaper. I never quite get why, if you see the value there and they're still playing at a high level, why you wouldn't go ahead and pull the trigger. And Sergej Milinkovic-Savic is the player who would be box to box. The other two, Brozovic and Ruiz, aren't the players who are going to get into the opposition box, but Milinkovic-Savic would definitely arrive and get on the end of any crosses that came from either side, whichever side you play him, obviously. So 3 different combos. I think they're 3 good duos in Serie A, and obviously Serie A should be ripe for the picking for Premier League sides, given the discrepancy.
So Savic for me. Sorry, yeah. So Savic for me would be the midfielder I would take out of the 3 that you mentioned, because he looks really good to me. He looks like a very, very, very good player. But for me, Immobile, I don't know. Like if I was Arsenal, I would prefer to keep Lacazette than getting someone like Immobile, because he's been scoring. Yeah.
I don't necessarily think you have to get rid of Lacazette to get in Immobile. You might have to. I don't know the books. I don't go into that depth. But I would agree with you. If there was a way of keeping both, I'd rather, because they offer something different each up front.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on. I must admit I didn't see any of the FA Cup games, but Liverpool, City, Chelsea all get through. Which is great, because I love it when the best teams are still there at the end of a competition, and you say the magic of the FA Cup. That happens in the earlier round. The semi-final is for the best. The semi-finals are for the best teams, and that's what we got. The 3 best teams have all made it through to the semi-finals. Obviously, City versus Liverpool is the juicy tie. Chelsea should have a path through to the final, so Liverpool and City both have to go through two tough fixtures to get to the end of it. Nev, and it will be a question for all of us, but I wanted to kick you off first, Nev. What are the chances of Liverpool, City and Chelsea all accomplishing their goals for the rest of the season, in terms of Liverpool winning the quadruple, City winning the treble and Chelsea winning the double? Who do you have as the most realistic to achieve all of that?
It would be between City and Liverpool, like, in all honesty. I think I'd probably put Liverpool slightly ahead of that because.
But can I defend? I'm not saying that Chelsea have to win the treble. Obviously, I'm taking them out of the Premier League race. So Chelsea for the double.
Yeah, so the Champions League and
okay, yeah, and the FA Cup.
Yeah, I'm not sure I trust Chelsea enough at this point in time. Especially, is Reece James back or not? Because he was a massive loss for them.
I think he's back. Yeah.
Okay, if they can get all their players back fully fit and playing like they were at the start of the season, I'd definitely put them up there with like the top 3 favourites to win the Champions League. And it's if they have all of their players back fully fit, they're extremely close to City and Liverpool. But I just think that they're slightly off. They're slightly behind them with that. But again, these are knockout competitions. It's a one-off game, and like Chelsea obviously have shown that they can win it, like last year winning the Champions League. But I think I'd still put Liverpool ahead of City to win more titles. But if City and Liverpool would, if it's possible for them to just handshake and say, okay, City wins the Champions League, Liverpool wins the league, I think either team would be happy to exchange that. But yeah, I think Liverpool look more threatening at the moment.
Well, that handshake would have been the case, probably the first league title. Well, and no, in fact, that season we won the Champions League and City won the title.
Yeah.
That handshake might have been the case for that season. But now we've got one. So, I don't know, Champions Leagues to get to 7, that's pretty enticing.
Yeah.
Marty, who have you got out of those 3?
I genuinely, just, disclaimer, I'm a Liverpool fan, but I still reckon Liverpool are more likely to do this for a couple of reasons. I think, number one, we have the highest ceiling in terms of like what we can create in terms of chances and goals scored. And we've never been a defensive team since Klopp has been here, right? So I feel like the substitutions that we can make in a game are pretty much players that would start for almost any team in the Premier League, especially City. City don't have strikers. They seem to miss a lot of chances. Like, they created a lot of chances, probably more than us, but they don't seem to score as many. And some games they run away with it. They score 6 goals or whatever. But there's other games where you're watching them and they're creating opportunities. They should have scored a few goals, but they scored none, or they scored 1 and it wasn't enough. And losing their main centre-back as well for City is a problem. So I think just in that regard alone, I think we take it just a little bit above City, more likely to happen. And Chelsea at the start of the season, for me, were the scariest team in the Premier League. They were the best team in the Premier League day. They were amazing. But they lost something. Something happened along the way, and they lost that edge that they had. And I think defensively, they're still pretty good, but they're not as good as they were. And up front, with Luke, the whole thing with Lukaku, I think, really caused a lot of problems for Chelsea. So I think if you had to pick one out of the 3 to win all of the tournaments that they can win, I would say it's Liverpool. But I'd still say that's pretty unlikely, right? The quadruple is pretty far out there.
Yeah, well, Matthew, if I can just add, Matthew, what Chelsea lost, I think in the same week or in the same 2-week period, they lost Chilwell and James, 2 of their fullbacks, and they were playing through them, just delivering balls into Lukaku.
Goals.
And Lukaku, and goals and assists. And Lukaku lost his service when they both went out, it feels like. And then, they didn't know where the goals were to come from. And those were the biggest misses for Chelsea, I feel.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, I never really thought of it like that, but it makes sense. And it makes sense why Lukaku was getting frustrated as well, saying that he wasn't getting enough service and the team wasn't playing for him anymore and all that sort of thing. You might be right.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Evan. You can tell that it shook them up a little bit in this recent well, I wouldn't say run because they've been winning every game that they've played recently, really. But in that run where they sort of lost their grip on the league title, and in recent weeks as well, you've seen Tuchel tinkering a little bit with his formations. And obviously, if he had those fullbacks fit, I don't think he ever would have tinkered with that 3-4-3 that was working so well for them. So that's a really good point. So I was doing this in my head today, and I actually tried to apply some maths and some logic to it. I don't think the maths is going to add up for actual mathematicians, but I'll give it a whirl.
This is a football podcast. It's all right.
I know. For pure mathematical reasons, I have Chelsea as the most likely to win the double, and obviously that's because that's one less trophy than City and one less trophy or two less trophies than Liverpool. And so I was working off the premise that I go into each game and I give the team a certain percentage chance to win that game, and then you just keep sort of like halving or whatever percentage of what you came up with them for them to win the next game. You just keep using that percent inside the number you had. So say Chelsea are playing Crystal Palace in the semi-final of the FA Cup. So that's a 90% win for Chelsea for me. 9 times out of 10, you play that game, Chelsea are going to win it.
Yeah.
And then from that, you use that 90% on Chelsea have Real Madrid in the Champions League. So I would say for me, that's a 55 to 60% chance that Chelsea will win that tie. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So, and then you go 60% of 90, and then you just keep going on what their opponents will be. So I put them at a 5.5%, 4.5% chance to win all of them. I had City at a 3.5% chance to win the treble, going off the premise that I believe they're 65% favourites to win the title. And then I had Liverpool at a 2% chance to win all 4, going off the same premise that they only had 35% chance to win the title. And on the title, I had to give. So you started at 50-50 because I believe that those two teams match up pretty much perfectly. You go into the game, you flip a coin, you see who wins. It might be a draw. So you got City, Liverpool. Let's be honest, because they're such good teams and they try to match each other, and it's always a great fun game when they play each other. But I thought I had to. You start at 50-50, and then obviously City have the extra point. So for me, that's an extra 5%. Knowing the fact that you're playing that game at home against Liverpool is another 5%. And obviously that point comes into it because now they know we only have to draw against Liverpool at home, and that's not a bad result, to be quite honest, as long as we're not losing by in the table. And then another 5% for the fixtures. I think City have the easier fixtures going in. I think Liverpool have more chance to slip up. It'll be interesting to see if anyone does. These two teams are so good. But yeah, that's the percentages I came up. So I still got Chelsea winning the double as the most likely.
I feel like the technicality of it all makes sense to me, actually. Like the Chelsea be more likely because it is true they only have to win 2, whereas Liverpool they have to win 3, and I guess so does City. So it's a little bit harder, right?
Yeah.
Can I just? I just want to add. I just want to add an interesting observation, more so than like any hard facts. But you know what this is sort of starting to remind me of? I think it was the 2010-2011 season, where Barcelona towards the end of the season they faced Real like 5 times or something in the space of like 30 days or like 20 days, because they had like a Copa del Rey semi-final. I think Copa del Rey is 2 legs. They had the El Clasico in the league, and then they also had they had the semi-final in the Champions League. And you could get something similar right now, like Man City are versing Liverpool in the league, I think in 2 weeks' time, and they're versing they're versing each other in the FA Cup, and then they might even get each other in the semi-final of the Champions League as well. So like in the space of like 30 days, they might be playing each other like 4 or 5 times then. Like, so that's,
that'd be crazy.
It's interesting to me. Like, it's just sort of like reminded me of that when Barca and Real were flying high, like compared to everyone, like in like all of Europe.
Yeah, and we touched on that one last pod, but yeah, it does really feel like that. Obviously, yeah, that's a good little historical anomaly where we've got all those games all together between City and Liverpool, like we did with that Real Madrid Barca that season. And just to cap off the pod tonight, we're going to talk about the Champions League draw, which I know we're all eager to talk about. But before we get into it, Nev, away goals, the floor is yours.
Well, I think I've, at least to you guys, I've made my disdain pretty shown for it, because like I just think it takes the excitement out of it, and it takes away the whole essence of like playing at home first or second leg, like away as well. Like it just doesn't feel like you then get any advantage from playing at home. And not only that, like we can obviously touch on player welfare again. It's going to be much easier to get to 120 minutes now, because you can carry a 1-0 win from the first leg, and then you finish 2-1 in the second leg, and that just stays at 2-2, and then obviously you're destined for extra time. So in terms of players having to play more, it's going to take a toll on their bodies then. And not only that, I think the level of football, like the excitement of it, drops as well, because players are tired after 90 minutes. So there's not going to be as tactical or as as captivating football played in the last 30 minutes as there will be over the first 90. And obviously that 90, like, it starts being extremely frantic. And if a team is down, like think about the games, like just this last one that went by with Real and PSG. Like if that were, like, one of the teams could have just been like, okay, let's Real could just said, okay, let's finish at 2-1 and then play for extra time or even penalties. But no, they went out and they tried to win in the 90. But then you'll have all other teams that will try and play for extra time and play for penalties. Like for instance, like an Atletico, I feel like they're always a team that tries to play for the draw and try to play for those, like, those 1-0 wins, or even try to win on penalties. And to me, it's going to take the excitement away from football. At least these fixtures, with empty stadiums because of COVID, like over the last 2 years, I can completely understand that there's no benefit to it. But now that, like, fans are back and, like, you have full capacity stadiums in pretty much every country in Europe, I don't see the point in taking it away. That's my thoughts. Not sure what you guys think.
I hate that they've taken that away. It was such an exciting thing about the Champions League, right? It was like a point of difference as well. Like every other cup competition in the world, I think, anyway, maybe I'm wrong in this, and maybe South America is different, but like most other cup competitions don't have this away goal rule. The Champions League does. And it just brings so much excitement. Like, take the example of the PSG Barcelona game where they scored, like, I can't remember how many goals they each scored, but it was a crazy game. Yeah. It was all because of the away goal. Barcelona had to score all these goals and also not concede one goal, because if they conceded one goal, they would have to score 2 more goals. So it just adds like a level of complication and diversity to the games that you don't get from anything else in football. The Champions League was that, and taking that away, it just feels so wrong. I hate, like, watching it sometimes, thinking like, oh, there's no away goals. I feel like it ruins it a little bit. But still, so much quality in the Champions League. You can't ruin it completely, but they're taking away something beautiful about it.
I'm not gonna completely zag on you guys. I get your points, but I'm gonna say, for me, it just doesn't change that much. I mean, you touched on it, Nev, that a team like Atletico would have played for extra time and played for the draw. Well, if they're in that position with away goals or not, they're going to do that because that's their DNA. It's whatever position they find themselves on the aggregate. And we talk about extra time. None of these ties. I know it's a small sample size. None of these ties went to extra time. So it didn't really change anything. I was still excited watching the games. You know the equation. Both teams know what's going on when you go into that game, and I think it's not so much away goals that is going to change your mindset or your mentality. Although, if they were still in place, if I was managing one of those teams in the Champions League, I would play to that away goal. So that's why I understand what you guys are saying. It did add that extra layer, but in terms of feeling too strongly about it, I don't really feel strongly about it. It's still, you know, the deal. There's an aggregate score. We could go to extra time. It's more likely to go to extra time now, and I agree that the quality of those 30 minutes aren't usually as good as a normal game. But like I said, I really think it's more dictated on your team's identity and what situation you find yourself in, whether it's away goals or not. It's not a complete zag. I think if you had to push me and say which do you prefer, I'd probably still say let's go away goal still. But I don't really care. It's just that's what the deal is. Both teams know we're going into it. You're still fighting for the Champions League, and in a lot of ways, it's a more fair way to do it because you know you put it out there that you don't get that advantage from playing at home second anymore or first anymore because you could argue that the advantage could go either way with away goals anyway. If you play away from home second leg, then all of a sudden you know exactly what you need to do away from home in terms of scoring goals. But if you play away from home first leg, you could score enough that you could essentially render the other team out of it. So I just think in terms of away goals, I just think it's a bit overstated the effect. And one more thing as well with the Barcelona game, like you referenced, Mati, that was made as the Barcelona PSG. That was made as incredible as it was because they needed to score all those goals, and I get that. But also, you would have got a comeback even if away goals weren't there. It would have been 6-1. I still can't believe that happened. I don't think you'll see something near like that in our lifetime.
In a long
that
time.
3-1 Real Madrid comeback against PSG, which was maybe not quite as good, but close to as good.
Yeah, it was like any big turnaround's good.
Look, I think it takes a little bit of like the spice and a little bit of the magic away. Personally,
yeah, I agree.
Like it's not going to be like now where it like completely ruins the fixtures, but it just like I said, it takes away that little bit of a little bit of magic. Like even when we look back to what was it, 2 or 3 years ago with Tottenham Man City, because Tottenham went through. Did they go through on away goals? And even again, Tottenham Ajax as well. Like they went through on away goals. Whereas that would have went to extra time then that second leg. So you know, Tottenham might not have found themselves in the final. What was in 2018 had away goals been taken out back then.
Yeah, and you know what? That would have been a fairer. Yeah, thank God for us, but it would have been a fairer result if Ajax were in that final. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah,
Lucas Moura saved them with that second half hat trick that never gets mentioned, really.
And
then he doesn't start the final. That's criminal.
No, that was criminal.
That was criminal. Yeah, that wasn't good from Poch.
Like as a player, like I'd just be thinking, what the hell do I need to do more? Like you pretty much saved like your entire club, like put them on your back, and there's no reward at all for it. Like, and he only got like 20 minutes or something in the final, or something like that. Like he didn't even get a whole half either. So
yeah, it's pretty bad.
And side note that those back-to-back Champions League semi-final second legs in 2019 were two of the most gripping mornings of football you could ever imagine.
Yeah, 100%.
Incredible. Liverpool with the 4-0 at Anfield, the Trent corner, and then that night in Ajax. When Lucas scored that goal in added time and the whole stadium just, their soul was ripped out. You could feel it. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Last kick of the game. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we got the away goals out of the way. We're all
bring him back.
We're all happy
bring
we
him back.
vented about that.
I'm pretty happy to vent.
I'll keep venting until they bring him back.
I think you're going to be fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the Champions League draw now. Mati, you were just saying off air how you thought it was the perfect draw, and I tend to agree with you. No two teams from the same country. If like we were talking about on the last pod, if you had to seed these 8 teams, then you would probably say that none of the top 4 seeds are playing each other, which is great for the semi-finals, because we should have some really good semi-finals. And I think if we're going to talk about these ties individually, I think we have to start at Chelsea and Real Madrid. I would say that's probably the 3 seed for me in Chelsea versus the 5 seed in Real Madrid. And I don't think Real Madrid can be bumped to any other place other than the 5 seed. So it may not be a question of did we overestimate Real Madrid, but did we get too excited by Real Madrid's result against PSG, Mati?
I don't know. I mean, I think if people got excited by that result, it was because considering how the tie was going, it was unexpected, right? No one really thought that PSG, being in the position that they were in, they were going to lose that tie to Real Madrid, and then all of a sudden it flipped on its head. So I don't know. The thing with Real Madrid is the players that they have, the key players, the match-winning players, are aging. They're getting older, and they're old now, but they still have enough time left. You know that this could be one of the last Champions Leagues that they get to go to the semi-final or maybe the final. You know, so I'm sure that to them this means a lot, and these guys are serial winners. You know, and they're not to be underestimated by any means. So I think it is going to be a very interesting tie. Chelsea are such a good team. Like I said before, to me they were the scariest team in the Premier League until recently, but they're still a fantastic team, and they could get it if they get it right against Real. I don't see Real winning, but at the same time, Real Madrid can beat anybody, I think, as well if they get it right too. So what a tie.
Definitely. Nev, same question to you. Do you think we got a little excited with what we saw from Real Madrid against PSG, especially given what they did in El Clasico over the weekend?
I wouldn't necessarily say that we got excited or overexcited, but I do think this is a terrible matchup for Real Madrid. I think both teams are essentially the same from last season in terms of personnel, and I think it's going to be the same or similar story as last season, where Chelsea are just too quick, too strong for Real Madrid's slightly aging team, and especially in the midfield as well. So I think it's going to be pretty much the same tie, and I think Chelsea will end up taking it. And Real Madrid were probably the perfect opponents for PSG, because over the years PSG has shown mental fragility, and Real Madrid they're serial winners, as Mati said, and they just had the mental fortitude to come out on top. So yeah, I think it's going to be very similar to last season's result, and I'd be surprised if it's anything different, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know if I go. Oh, sorry, Mati. I'll do a little bit. I don't think it'll be surprising if Real win, but I would put Chelsea as favourites for sure.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the matchup in terms of a footballing sense, and you talked about it before, the fullbacks for Chelsea will be interested to see who they have available for the ties. because they'll be really important in this tie. And you also said this, that midfield. And I sort of touched on it last week with N'Golo Kante being able to do the job of 1.5 to 2 players in there. Well, now he's doing that job next to a Jorginho or a Kovacic, whoever they start. But he's doing that job against players like Modric and Kroos and Casemiro. So it's not like he's trying to track a box-to-box midfielder in there who's going to run away from the two and really impress those overloads in the middle of the park. I think he'll be able to cover that ground to allow Chelsea to only play with two in there. And then that's why the wing backs will become so important, because they'll be freed up to possibly go 2-on-1 or push the Real Madrid wingers back out wide. And if they go 2-on-1, we saw what Dembele did to Nacho today. Hopefully, obviously, Real Madrid will have Mendy back, but even we saw what Mbappe did to Carvajal on the other side of 1v1. So imagine if we start getting 2v1s with Chelsea out there, and they really expose that. So, and obviously we've also got to touch on last season. You talk about last season's result, Nev. They have the psychological advantage, Chelsea, because they beat this Real Madrid side in the semi-finals. Obviously, granted, no David Alaba in that side. But they do have that. It's more or less the same teams, and they have that psychological advantage. They have the psychological advantage of being defending champions. And another thing I want to touch on with Chelsea is, if we want to point to the turmoil the club's going through, they've never seen it to this extent, but for the most part, it's in Chelsea's DNA to deal with upheaval. And their players have always been professionals, and they've always had it. Seemingly, they always have to deal with a manager going at least every 2 seasons, and the upheaval of that. So they're not living in stability. If you go to Chelsea, you know what you're getting into when you go to Chelsea, and that's why I feel like they profile professional players as the kind of players who go to Chelsea. It's never. They do buy a lot of young players, but they tend to loan them out and then sell them eventually. Obviously, famous examples: Kevin De Bruyne and Mo Salah. So those professionals seem to stay, and it's part of Chelsea's DNA. So if we wanted to point to that, I just don't know how much of a toll that's going to take on this Chelsea side. Matti, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you guys both pointed out, the reverse fixture last Champions League tournament, like Chelsea was just so much better than Real Madrid then. I think not much has changed for Real, right, in terms of lineup, and neither has for Chelsea. Maybe Chelsea arguably got maybe a little bit better, a bit more threatening, maybe. But I think Chelsea have to have the psychological edge on Real Madrid and the energy edge as well. Like, they're going to be more energetic. And in terms of like all the turmoil that's happening at Chelsea, I don't think the players are too badly affected by this. Like, the way they've been playing in the Premier League, they don't look affected to me, and nothing really changes for them. They're still there. They're still got to do a job. They want to win things, I'm sure, and like all of this will get resolved one way or another. If it's them leaving to another country on a free, to another team on a free, or if it's just them staying at Chelsea and continuing on to do what they're doing. I don't think all of that is affecting the players much at all. Not enough to lose a Champions League tie like this. So yeah, I think they have the edge.
And I wanted to, after I saw the draw, I almost wanted to write an obituary for my Karim Benzema narrative of winning the Champions League last pod, because now Real have to go through Chelsea, which I don't expect them to do. But if they do go through Chelsea, waiting for them, we all expect should be Man City. Man City drawn against Atletico. But Nev, I wanted to ask, was Atletico actually the worst draw that Man City could have got?
If we're talking about like seeded teams and like some unseeded teams, I think it is the worst draw, because Atletico, if we go back to the Man City Crystal Palace fixture, Atletico are going to employ a similar tactic where they're just going to put all 10 behind the ball and try to hit them on the counter, and they're going to do a much better job of it, and they're going to probably be more threatening. So it's gonna be it's probably gonna be a really bad fixture for them, and it's not gonna be a shock. It'll be a slight shock, but it's not gonna be a massive shock if Athletic do go through on like a tight scoreline, like a 1-0 or a 2-1 or something like that, or even if they go through like on penalties. That's not going to shock me at all, because Man City have shown that like they can create 20 chances, but they can go without scoring a goal, and they've done that on a handful of occasions this season. So it wouldn't surprise me if they can't put the ball in the back of the net against Atletico.
And we've seen Simeone have success against Guardiola side at Bayern Munich on the way to the 2016 final against Real Madrid, where Athletic pretty much did what you just outlined, Evan. They just sat behind the ball, hit on the counter attack, and knocked out what was truly a great Bayern team under Guardiola. Those whole 3 years he was there, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So we've seen this prior, and I say worst draw, and I was kind of putting seeded teams in there as well, because I think if Man City got drawn against Liverpool, you expect that to be a 50-50. We're all disappointed that that's the final, or kind of disappointed. I mean, the benefit of getting the final in the quarterfinal is that you get 2 legs of it, home and away. So in a lot of ways, from a pure football standpoint, it's a better draw if you get the final earlier than the actual final. But, if Man City get Liverpool, then you just say, that's 50-50. We understand if they get knocked out in that, or even if they get a Bayern or a Chelsea, it's kind of like that as well. But with Atletico, like you said, City are expected to win. I would say if you play that game 10 times, I would expect, or the tie 10 times, I'd expect City to win 7 of them. So they are expected, but as you point out, you wouldn't be surprised if Atletico and Simeone can do the number on City. Mati, what do you think of that this tie coming up?
This is a really tricky tie. I think Atletico are a very difficult team to play against, especially if you're a team like City and you're like Liverpool that want to attack and they want to score goals, and they're not. The main focus is always to be on the front foot, and Atletico feed off that, right? They want to make it as tough as possible for those teams, and they feed off making it difficult and the frustration the teams sometimes get from playing against them, and then they build and build and build until eventually they score 1 goal, and they know that they got you now. So that could totally happen in this tie, like we're never saying, like a very 2-1 or a 1-0 or something. You could see it happening, but at the same time, when Liverpool played Atletico this season in the group stages, Liverpool, I mean, we got lucky. We got Atletico got a red card every time we played against them, but I think they weren't amazing in defense like they have been in the past. So I think City should win, and I agree. Yeah, City are favourites, but I think that City are just going to be a little bit too much for them overall. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Atletico win as well. So it's tricky, but City should have the edge.
It's going to be a very lackluster game if Atleti get the first goal. It's going to be extremely one-sided. Like I wouldn't like if Atleti get the first goal in either tie and go up 1-0, then it's going to be like 90% possession for City, and they're just going to bombard them. And yeah, I fear for Man City if they can't. Yeah, if they don't get the first goal and Atleti do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're both good points, because Mati points out you can contrast Atletico's performance against Liverpool in the group stages, and they weren't at the same level. They were, in fact, at the Wanda, but they weren't at the same level at Anfield. And you also point out this isn't the same Atletico defense. This isn't the defense that has Diego Godin and Jan Oblak on top form, and they're missing something. It's not the defense of old. Especially Jan Oblak's form is of great concern to Atletico. I mean, that goal he conceded against United in the first leg was terrible goalkeeping. I mean, that shot should never be getting past a world-class goalkeeper. And then the second leg, he was flapping at everything in the end. Just he doesn't look the same goalkeeper that we're used to seeing, so that's got to be of concern. But Atletico, it all comes down to whether City can take their chances. Like you've pretty much said, because Atletico play in the style. Well, they haven't always this season, but I think they've realised now that it's the best way for them to succeed, and they play in the style that Simeone has always perfected, which is defend your box. The problem with defending your box is you concede all territory and possession, and you're under siege against these good teams. They do it particularly well, but you're still relying on so much luck if you're going to give up that much possession and territory. You rely on a lot of luck that the ball doesn't bounce in the wrong way for you, and you're able to be there for every clearance, and it might hit the post once or twice, and that saves you. It's not the way I would like my teams to play, but hey, Simeone's got it down to a science, and that's what makes this matchup. It might be a boring matchup, but it makes it intriguing in terms of the result and to see what Atletico could do to frustrate Man City.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a boring matchup, right? Like, if City get a goal or two, then Atletico have to really come out and start playing a little bit out of the comfort zone, which could be very exciting, you know? Because they have the players to play well. Like, they have so many good players that I would be concerned about, you know, in attacking sense. So if they have to come out and attack, it could be very exciting. Hopefully.
Yeah, it's just if they start going toe-to-toe, obviously you're going to take City every time in that matchup if it becomes that kind of game. So if in terms of Atletico wanting to win it, I think it has to be a specific style of play.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, so we're talking about all this negative Simeone football. Look, don't get me wrong, I like Simeone style of football over the years, but at the end of the day, effective is effective, and I'm always a fan of effective over anything else. So. But we're talking about this negative style, and then we go over to the other side of the quarterfinal draws, and do we agree that it's not, Nev, do we agree that it's not the quarterfinal draw that we're looking at on this side, but it's the semi-final?
Which one was that?
So we got Bayern versus Villarreal and Liverpool versus Benfica.
Yeah, I think those...
But obviously the winners of those play each other in the semis.
Yeah. Well, that's hopefully, I think for the neutral, like you're hoping that Liverpool can do the job and that Bayern can do the job. So you get Liverpool versus Bayern. Out of all of the teams that you could have gotten, I think you can swap Benfica and Real, and Liverpool or Bayern would have been happy with both draws. So they definitely got the easier draws out of them. Not no disrespect to Benfica or Villarreal, but that's the reality of the situation. So you would expect Liverpool and Bayern to be facing each other in the semi.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that matchup, Marty?
Well, the Benfica Liverpool game, it's a tricky game in the sense that Liverpool are huge favourites to win it, right? But with that, you being the big favourites is sometimes the underdog has that. They don't have anything to lose. They're going in there knowing that they're playing a great team, and all they have to do is just do little things right, get all of that to their favour, and then potentially you can get an upset. And how amazing would that be? So you would say 9 times out of 10 in that sort of tie, Liverpool should win that, but it's slightly scary, I would say, a little nerve-wracking, because we're not usually this big of favourites, I would say, in a quarterfinal of the Champions League, against. So it's scary, but Liverpool should have that. And Bayern, Villarreal again, another playing a lot better than what a lot of people might give them credit for. I think they look good. They're just they're not that big club, but Bayern are just so damn good that really Villarreal should have no chance. But I think that's probably a closer game than Benfica Liverpool, I would say.
Yeah, they're very similar, and I think we're talking about the quarterfinal ties. And yes, it's football, and yes, we're Liverpool supporters, so we don't want to jinx it or anything like that. But if we're being honest, it's going to take a it's going to take a near miracle of football for us to be seeing one of Villarreal, Benfica advance, let alone both. So I think if we ascend above the quarterfinal ties and we get cocky with it, like I am right now, but we look at what we expect to be seeing, Bayern Munich versus Liverpool. And Nev, I just wanted to get your thoughts on how you see a semi-final of those two, how they match up, and what you think of each team's chances going into it.
I'll just correct you and say a potential semi-final. Because, like you said,
Potential.
Yeah.
Everything I'm talking about when we ascend to the semi-final is potential.
Yeah, of course. I think that would be a much more interesting matchup because, like, if you get the results that you expect from the other two games, like let's say that City and Chelsea go through, and like one of those teams runs on your side, yeah, it's not as exciting than seeing like international football like Liverpool versus Bayern. So you got England versus Germany. So it should be an exciting game in terms of who I think would come out on top. I do think that's a very tricky one because Bayern's defense just hasn't. It seems like there's something missing there. So I think like your front three could definitely give him like a heap of trouble, but like in the midfield, I think it's pretty even. But up front, like you guys are both like Bayern's more top heavy than you guys than Liverpool. So, but it'll be very very intriguing to see the Van Dijk Lewandowski matchup as well. Like because I've seen Giroud give Van Dijk a little bit of trouble. So like that big man up front give Van Dijk a little bit of trouble. I've seen that before in the past, and it would be interesting to see how arguably one of the world's best number 9 goes up against Van Dijk and how Van Dijk deals with that. So that's going to be very interesting. And also, let's not forget, Martinelli had Trent on toast pretty much for that whole game. So now Trent is going to be going up against either a Gnabry or a Sane or who's the last one?
Trent and Sane that's always been an interesting combination. When Sane was at City, I feel like Trent really struggled with him. He was like big time kryptonite for Trent.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting how your fullbacks deal with those attacking threats from Bayern's wings because they're arguably better than Arsenal's, and Arsenal gave them a little bit of trouble. And a lot of your outlets come through Robertson and Trent. So if they can if they're pinned back, I think you guys might struggle a little bit against them.
Well, Liverpool don't get pinned back. It's part of their tactical system. They just don't really ever allow themselves to get into the mentality of being pinned back unless it's late in the game and they're tired. They'd rather try and risk it with an offside rather than ever concede territory and sit in a shape, which frustrates the living hell out of me. But that's what they do. They leave it so. And I guess you touched on it, Ev. This tie would be so open, I believe, between these two if we get this semi-final. I mean, you're talking about Trent dealing with the wingers. He struggles to deal with wingers all the time, but you sacrifice it because what it gives you going forward. But similarly, who starts for Bayern at centre-back? It's got to be, Sula and Upamecano? And Sula's okay, but I mean, he looks like a truck and he's got to try and deal with Mane and Salah moving into the channels. And Upamecano has definitely not hit the ground running in a Bayern Munich shirt. I saw the game against Union Berlin on the weekend, and he had shaky moments when the game was still in the balance there, and he was giving the ball away and he was charging forward into midfield, even though he was the sweeper and he was leaving big gaps behind. So that would be an interesting matchup. But the one you talked about was that Lewandowski versus Van Dijk matchup there. Matti, who you taking? Lewandowski versus Van Dijk. Who do you think will get the better of the other one in that matchup?
I think so tricky. The problem is like overall in the whole home and away legs, I would say Van Dijk. But I think Lewandowski is smart enough to not put himself against Van Dijk too often, because he moves around very well. So I can't imagine that he'll want to be one against Van Dijk very often. So he'll always go towards the Matip side or whoever is playing there. But in terms of the Bayern Liverpool potential semi-final, the problem that I have with Liverpool is, like you said, we just give too much. Like we try and play this offside game a lot, and in trying to do that, we give a lot of chances. And I think a team like Bayern, who is so prolific, will score goals against us, no doubt. So I don't know what kind of game it will be, but it'll be crazy one. A beautiful match, like both of the home and away games. I think it'll be such a good semi-final. So hopefully both of the two teams go through, and we can get to see that because that'll be very entertaining.
Yeah, of course. And this one feels like if that's how it pans out, and those two teams are playing each other in the semi-finals, this one feels like it could have a 4-4 or a 5-5 aggregate. Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think both teams will get chances and score, and obviously Bayern Munich, their difference is that they have Lewandowski up front, who's probably the best. Well, he is the best finisher out of both these teams. So if the chance comes, you expect him to take it. But similarly, Liverpool have the advantage of they have a really strong, dependable centre back they can trust. Unlike I look at Bayern Munich and I don't see that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'll be
that's
interested
true.
in, like I said last pod, with Bayern Munich's balance as well. The midfield battle will be really important. It'll be interesting to see which midfielders Bayern Munich have at that stage. Whether it will be what they use it at the moment, which is basically Kimmich and Musiala in there together. I think Liverpool have a really good chance of overrunning them in that area if that's what it is. But Bayern, if they do play only those two, they'll be ultra attacking, and they'll play with Coman out wide, and they'll play with Sane or Gnabry out wide, or maybe even Gnabry in the Muller role running through the middle. And if they time those runs right, then they should get chances because Liverpool love to give away chances.
Yeah.
It really does feel like it could be a 4-4-5 if that's what we get. And obviously, I've already jinxed it, so it's probably not what we're going to get, but that's what we all want to see, isn't it, really?
Definitely, for sure.
Nev, anything to add?
No, not really. I think we've touched on that, as much as we could. Who we think should come out on top and what the potential matchups could be. Obviously, we didn't touch on like a potential Man City versus Chelsea semi, but I think those two fixtures of City, Atletico, and Chelsea, Real, at least on paper, they're much more closer than a Benfica, Liverpool, and a Bayern, Villarreal. So, but I think for a quarterfinal draw, that's the best you could have hoped for to then get the best semi-final draw where you get the top 4 teams, because I think you said Chelsea, Real are probably like a 4-5 for you, and if either of those two go through, there won't, you can't be upset at either of them. As a neutral, you can't be upset at either of that. Whereas, like, if a Benfica goes through over Liverpool, you're like, the best team didn't. On paper, the best team didn't go through. Or if Villarreal goes through over Bayern, the best team didn't go through. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Marty, any finishing thoughts? Anything you wanted to get off your chest?
No, bring back the away goals. You hear us, UEFA?
And we might have some more fun topics about what UEFA are doing with football and what FIFA are doing with football in one of the future pods. But I think for tonight, Good stuff, guys. It was a pleasure talking to both of you, Mati.
Yeah.
We'll see you on again soon. And
Yep.
Nev, enjoy the rest of your day over there. Hopefully in a bit of sun over there in Croatia. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, boys. It's been great.
Take care.
Take care. See you later.